Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to walk you through the break-even analysis and the break-even plot using Excel. So we are working with the same example that we have in the worksheet. If you have worked that through manually, you already know that the break-even point is 1200. However, you can set up your own Excel sheet with a formula which can give you the break-even point if you vary the fixed cost, variable cost or revenue. So very first thing, when you attempt this question on your own, set up an Excel sheet in this manner. There are other ways to do it as well, so I'm going to show you only one way of solving this type of problem and plotting it using Excel. Okay, so let's kick off by calculating the break-even point. So the formula for the break-even point is fixed cost divided by revenue minus variable cost per unit. So here, in order to apply the formula, so we have the fixed cost in K3 and we're going to divide this by K5, which is revenue per unit, minus the variable cost per unit in K4. So at the moment it's giving you an error because we're dividing K3 by 0. So let's put these numbers in. So 6,000, and we have the variable cost $2 and revenue per unit $7. We know that the break-even point is 1200 here. Once you want to produce this table, before you go ahead and plot it, start with a quantity 0. So Q here is the quantity, so I'm going to put a 0 quantity here. Fixed cost, we already know that. So fixed cost we have at 6,000. So I'm going to use the absolute references here. So my fixed cost value is in $K, $3. So the reason behind using the cell references to automate this Excel sheet, if you remember from chapter 1, we're going to use models to solve the problems. So once you have it set up an Excel sheet by using the cell references, it's automated, then you're simply going to vary these values based on your requirement, and it should be able to adjust the total cost, revenue, profit and the plot based on your values you input here, right? Okay, so the variable cost, we know the number of units, so which is in A5, and we know the variable cost per unit, which is in K4. So again, I need to use a absolute reference, so $K, $4. So that will give me the total variable cost based on the number of units produced. Total cost, which is simply sum of fixed costs and the variable costs. So B5 plus C5, and similarly we can get the revenue in the same manner as we got the variable costs. So the total revenue for the units being sold is going to be A5, that's where I have the quantity, multiplied by revenue per unit, so that is K5. So $K, $5. At the moment no units being sold, so revenue is 0, and the profit is going to be the revenue, total revenue, which is E5 minus total cost, so D5, so minus 6,000. So I'm going to convert this to dollar value so that we can have appropriate units. So similarly, let's convert these to dollar values as well. Okay, so the next thing is we want to generate some more entries for our break-even analysis table, right? So that we can have a nice plot. The one way is that you type these values manually. So let's say I'm going to start from 0. I'm going to say 300, 600 and so on, right? So increasing these units at a given rate so that you can have a nice plot. But the other way you can do is you can automate this part too. So I'm going to say A5 and increment at every 300 units, right? So either way is fine. You can either use formula or do it manually. So I'm going to populate this table with few numbers. So let's decrease it a little bit so that we are not creating a really big plot, as we already have the formulas being applied into these cells. So I'm going to select all of these cells, selecting from B5 to F5, and you can see there's a plus sign. Once you take your cursor at the right hand bottom corner of the selection, left click, hold it and drag it down. We have our formulas being nicely applied, and we can see here's the break-even point where we have the total cost equals to total revenue, right? So we are not making any profit at the moment. So in order to plot it, let's select the table starting from quantities and up to revenue. So once you selected this table, go to insert, and then we are going to go to line chart. So either you can add a line chart from here, or otherwise you can always go to recommended charts. So if you look at chart number 1, that's more like a break-even analysis chart or break-even analysis plot, right? So I'm going to select this very first one. So from here we can tell that that's where your break-even point is, right? So around 1200 units. So if you take your cursor here, revenue point $400 at 1200 units. And if you want it to look like as in your textbook, you can remove this variable cost line from here. If you select this line, just press the delete key. So it is more like as is displayed in your textbook. So you have only fixed cost, total cost, the gray line, and the yellow line as revenue. And you can rename this chart. So I'm going to call it break even analysis. Okay, so getting back to my first point on the automation. So let's say the fixed cost is $7,000. So once you change this, your plot and the table we created, all those values are going to change. So anything you change here is going to get reflected into the table. So that's why it's essential to automate the Excel sheets so that you're minimizing the effort when it comes to the analysis. So my recommendation, never type your numbers. Try to automate as much as possible so that you're minimizing the effort when it comes to changing the Excel document. So have a look at it. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.